You did everything right. You saved aggressively, invested wisely, and one Tuesday morning, completely unremarkably, a number appears on your screen that means you never have to work again, and you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel afraid. This is the moment millions of people spend decades working toward, and almost no one talks about what actually happens when you get there. The path to financial independence is well documented: the spreadsheets, the savings rates, the strategies. But the morning after, that is a different country entirely. Financial independence, the point where your investments generate enough income to cover your living expenses indefinitely, sounds like an arrival, a finish line. But for a surprising number of people who reach it, it feels less like crossing a finish line and more like stepping off a cliff into open air. Here's the thing nobody tells you: the skills that got you here are almost useless for what comes next. Building wealth requires discipline, sacrifice, delayed gratification. Living from wealth requires something entirely different, and most of us have never practiced it for a single day of our adult lives. Let's start the night before. Not the morning you hit the number. The night before you stop working. You might expect excitement, relief, a champagne cork feeling. What many people actually report is a quiet, creeping dread. A voice that whispers, "What if this still isn't enough?" That fear has a name in the FIRE community. FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early, and the fear is called one more year syndrome. It's the psychological trap where, no matter how much you've saved, you convince yourself that just one more year of work will make you truly safe. And then another year passes, and another. At the heart of that fear is a single question: how much is actually enough? The most widely cited answer in the personal finance world comes from research known as the Trinity Study, which found that withdrawing 4% of your portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, has historically sustained a retirement portfolio for 30 years in nearly all market conditions. But here's the catch: if you retire at 35 instead of 65, you're not planning for 30 years. You might need your money to last 50 or 60. And financial researchers who have modeled those longer timelines suggest the truly safe withdrawal rate drops closer to 3.25 or 3.5%. That gap sounds small. It can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in required savings. So let's say you've done the math, and you've done it conservatively. The morning finally comes. You wake up and there is nowhere to be. No meeting, no commute, no inbox demanding your attention. For the first few hours, it feels like a vacation. And then slowly, a strange feeling begins to settle in. Your job wasn't just a source of income, it was the invisible skeleton of your entire day. It told you when to wake up, when to eat, when to think, who to talk to. The moment it's gone, you discover that you have no idea how to build a day from scratch. And that freedom, it turns out, can feel suffocating. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that retirees average more than 8 hours of leisure time per day, the highest of any demographic group studied. That sounds like a dream. But researchers who study well-being have found that unstructured leisure without meaning or purpose doesn't produce happiness. It produces restlessness. There's a deeper issue underneath the restlessness. For most high achievers, and most people who reach FIRE are high achievers, your identity and your career are almost completely fused. When someone asks who you answer with what you do. And the day you stop doing it, you face a question you may never have seriously considered. Who are you actually when no one is asking for your output? The research on happiness is genuinely humbling here. Studies by psychologist Sonia Lubomirsky suggest that roughly half of your subjective sense of well-being is determined by something called a genetic happiness set point, a baseline you tend to return to regardless of what happens in your life. Win the lottery, get a promotion, retire early. Within months, this is why so many early retirees describe a happiness dip in the first year, not a crisis, but a deflation. The goal they built their adult life around is gone. The anticipation is over, and nothing has rushed in to replace it yet. Psychologists who study retirement transitions have documented. And then there's the loneliness. This one catches people completely off guard. You didn't realize how much of your social life was built on the scaffolding of work, the colleagues, the shared problems, the Friday lunches, the simple act of being seen every day. Research has found that workplace social ties are one of the primary sources of connection. If you have a partner, the dynamics shift in ways that can strain even strong relationships. Imagine your spouse still leaves every morning for work, and you're home alone in a life they haven't joined yet. Research published in the Journal of Marriage and Family found that marital satisfaction tends to drop in the early phase of retirement, particularly when only one partner retires at a time. Meanwhile, something unexpected is happening with your money. You spent years in accumulation mode, the mindset where saving feels virtuous and spending feels dangerous. Now you're supposed to flip a switch and start withdrawing, and many people simply can't do it. They keep living like they're still saving, even when there's no financial reason to. Economists actually have a name for this pattern: the retirement consumption puzzle. Research has found that household spending drops 15 to 20% at the point of retirement, not because retirees can't afford to spend, but because the psychological habits of saving run so deep that they persist long after the need for them is gone. You built a frugality muscle over decades. It doesn't stop flexing just because you asked it to. The first time you watch your portfolio balance drop, not because the market crashed, but because you withdrew money to pay your bills, it can feel viscerally wrong. Even if the math says you're fine, even if you planned for exactly this moment, seeing the number go down activates something primal, something that accumulated years of anxiety about not having enough. And the math does deserve some respect here. There's a real risk called sequence of returns risk. The idea that a major market downturn in your first few years of retirement can permanently damage your portfolio's ability to recover, even if the long-term average returns are fine. It's not about what the market does over 30 years. It's about what the market does in years 1 through 5 while you're withdrawing. Then comes the healthcare question. And for early retirees, this is often the most practically brutal surprise. If you leave your employer before age 65, you lose access to employer-sponsored health insurance and you're years away from Medicare eligibility. You are on your own. And self-funding health coverage for an early scale that out over a long retirement and the numbers become staggering. Estimates suggest an average retired couple may need around $315,000 just to cover healthcare costs over the course of retirement. That's not living expenses. That's not travel or housing. That is purely the cost of staying covered and cared for. For early retirees, it's even more. The Affordable Care Act created a critical bridge for early retirees, a marketplace where you can purchase individual health coverage without being denied for pre-existing conditions. If you manage your taxable income carefully in retirement, you may qualify for significant subsidies that reduce those costs dramatically. But it requires planning, vigilance, and awareness that. Let's fast forward to about 3 months in. The initial disorientation is fading. You found a rhythm of sorts: coffee in the morning, a walk, some reading. But something still feels off. The days feel full but not purposeful. There's a distinction between being busy and being engaged, and you're learning it in real time. Purpose is not a luxury. Research published in the journal Clinical Interventions in Aging found that retirees with a strong sense of life purpose have significantly lower mortality risk than those without one. Not slightly lower, meaningfully, measurably lower. Your reason for getting up in the morning is not a philosophical nicety. It may be one of the most important variables in how long you actually live. What many long-term FIRE retirees say, looking back years later, is that the happiest version of their post-work life wasn't total idleness. It was doing something that felt like work, but on their own terms. A project, a cause, a skill they were developing, not for money, not for a boss, but for the intrinsic satisfaction of building something and seeing it matter. Research consistently shows that retirees who regularly volunteer report significantly higher life satisfaction than those who don't. The mechanism isn't charity for its own sake, it's contribution. It's the feeling of mattering to something beyond yourself. That feeling, it turns out, doesn't disappear just because you're financially independent. If anything, it intensifies. The most successful early retirees tend to approach their weeks with the same intentionality they once applied to their savings rate. They design anchor activities, commitments that repeat, that create structure, that give Tuesday a different texture than Saturday, not because they have to, but because the human brain craves rhythm. Freedom without rhythm can quietly become emptiness. They also deliberately rebuild their social world. This means joining things, communities, clubs, courses, groups, not passively waiting for connection to arrive. Work handed you your social circle. Retirement requires you to construct one yourself. It takes more effort than you'd expect and more vulnerability than most high achievers are comfortable with. Around the 6-month mark, something often begins to shift with money too. The first few withdrawals feel wrong. By the 10th or 12th, you've started to internalize the logic. This is what the money was for. The portfolio is doing its job. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the frugality grip loosens. Not recklessly, but enough. And in that loosening, you start to encounter a question that may be the most important one in this entire journey. What is enough? Not in the financial sense, you've already answered that, but in the deeper sense. Enough experience, enough connection, enough contribution, enough rest. These are not questions the accumulation phase asks. They are the questions that the freedom phase demands. By the second year, most people who've done the inner work report something that sounds almost too simple. They're happy, not because every day is extraordinary, most days aren't, but because they have built a life that is genuinely, deliberately their own. That is rarer than it sounds. Most people never get the chance to try. The people who struggle most in early retirement tend to share one trait. They had no clear answer to the question of what they were retiring to. They knew exactly what they were retiring from: the commute, the boss, the Sunday night dread. But the vision beyond that was blurry. Fire without a destination is just escape, and escape eventually runs out of places to go. What the research across all these different fields, economics, psychology, medicine, sociology, quietly reveals is a single uncomfortable truth. Financial independence removes the external pressure that was organizing your life, but it does not automatically supply meaning to replace it. You have to build that, intentionally, from scratch. There is a privilege in this problem that deserves to be named. Most people on Earth will never face this particular challenge. The fact that achieving financial freedom can feel destabilizing is not a tragedy. It is a reminder that we are more complex than our financial plans account for. Money solves the money problem. Everything else is still yours to figure out. So what actually changes the day you reach fire? Everything external stays the same. The world doesn't pause to acknowledge it. Your friends go to work. The bills still arrive. The news is still the news. What changes is internal and invisible. You have been handed a blank calendar and told, this is yours now. Fill it. The financial work is done. The deeper work, the work of understanding who you are without a role, what you want without a deadline, how to live a life rather than just optimize one, that work is just beginning. And unlike the financial journey, there is no spreadsheet for it, no back-tested strategy, no safe withdrawal rate for meaning. Remember that unremarkable Tuesday morning we started with, the number on the screen, the silence, the unexpected fear. That moment is not the ending. It turns out it's the beginning of an entirely different kind of question. Not how do I build enough, but what is this life actually for? The deepest truth this journey reveals is deceptively simple. Financial independence is freedom from, but it is not by itself freedom to. The second half of that sentence is the one that matters, and only you can write it. You came here wondering what happens the day you reach fire. Now you know it is not a destination. It is a door. What you do the moment you walk through it, that is the most important financial decision you will ever make. And for once, there is no right answer, only yours.